Hello and welcome everybody. Bienvenidos a nuestra familia. It is so amazing to be with you all again. It's another Friday. It's time for another lesson before we all break for the weekend. Today I wanted to talk about something that's relevant to what I talked about last week, where we discussed the Federal Reserve as well as this thing called the interest rate, the federal interest rate. But that opens up a wider conversation about what interest rates are in general. Are they free money? Are they our worst nightmare? Or can they be both? Understanding what an interest rate is, how and when it's paid out, and how it influences anything you do, from saving for college, to getting a student loan, to buying your first house. Interest rates are everywhere, but not all interest rates are alike. So today I want to cover with you something that is relevant whether you are 50 or 15. Interest rates are important and they're a lot simpler to understand than it may seem. So today we're going to start off by talking all about interest rates, talk through some different examples, show you how those examples turn out in real dollars and cents, and lastly, I'm going to show you easy ways that you can avoid all of the math, but get all of the information and power that you will learn through figuring out how interest rates work. So that is all of the topic today, is all about the lovely world of interest rates. So let us get started by saying hello to everyone we have with us today in the chat live. Again, these webinars, if you're watching it when it's recorded, we do record these live with everyone in attendance at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time every Friday. So if you're around during those hours, come join us, say hi, and join the conversation. So, hello Blaze, Mao, Carlos, Contacto, Hilda, Maria, Emelida, Lucia, Juan, Erika, Riley, Kira, Ana, Delia, Erika, Adelita, Rosa, Magnolia, Eddie. Eddie, I've seen your name so many times. It is so good that you still are around. Thank you for being here. Elizabeth, Lily, Norma, Kike, Xochitl, Andrew, Jenny, Nelly, and Brenda. So many amazing returning faces, so many new ones. Welcome everyone. Let's get started with interest rates. So we're going to first talk about the very basics of what interest rates are. Interest rates are a form of monetary return. So interest rates don't just poof out of nowhere. It is money that is made from other money. So interest happens or arises when money is either lent, deposited, or borrowed in an account that is what's called interest bearing. It doesn't mean that it's a bear, it means that it gives you interest rates. And interest rate is typically a percentage. So you'll see it be 2%, 5%. And the reason is because these are the percent of the amount is how the interest is calculated. So it'd be 5% of $100, for example. And these percentages are usually annual. So if you see an interest rate, it's likely that it's something that is annual, but can vary in period. Period is a fancy word for saying how many times a year do you get interest payments? And I'll go through all of the different examples of that here in a minute. But the interest is really important because the percent determines exactly how much or how little is either paid or gained as interest. Oh, I just realized that logo was a little redundant. Ta-da! All right. So what actually goes into an interest calculation? These are the building blocks that we're going to use for the entire conversation. So pay attention to this one slide. It is going to be very important for the rest of the presentation. The first thing we have is not the head of your school, but it is a principal. It is the starting amount of money that you begin with. So the principal is how much you start with. Then we have the interest rate. It is a percent. Then we have the period, which is how often or how many times a year this interest is applied. The time, which is years. How many years is this interest applied? And lastly, these four components work together. So all four of these come together, and with that, we can figure out how much interest we gain, over how long, or after a certain period of time. Let's use an example here to really see this more clearly. And I'm going to use a very, very simple example of what's called, well, simple interest. So we start off by having $100. Juan de los Palotes wants to start saving for retirement. So he doesn't know about 401ks. He doesn't know about IRAs. What he knows about is Bank of America has savings accounts. So he puts his money in a savings account. This savings account, and this is an example, by the way, if banks actually gave us 5% interest, we would all be very happy. They don't. But let's use an example that this savings account has a 5% annual interest rate. So what that means is every year, Juan gets 5% of his money as interest. 5% of $100 is $5. So after the interest is applied, Juan ends up with $105. Free money, right? Well, yes, technically it's free to you. But as we learned last time, the banks don't just keep your money in a savings account and just let it live there collecting cobwebs. Instead, they take your money and go and use it to lend out to Maria down the street or to lend it to another bank. They're going to use your money, but as a result, they give you a little bit something extra. So they give you that interest rate as a thank you for letting them borrow your money. Who knew that you were lending money to the banks when you decided to open a savings account? But that is how it works. This is not some magic money that appears out of nowhere. Banks are using your money and in exchange give you some profits from what they made. So now, how much will Juan have after 5 years? And this is where we get into the world of simple interest. Simple interest is pretty simple. It is the amount you end with is equal to the principal, or how much you started with, times 1 plus the rate, which is our percent, times time. How many years? So again, what we have is pretty simple. How much you started with, and then that is multiplied by 1, because it's itself. You're not going to lose money here. You're making money. So that 1 plus is the original principal plus the interest that you get per year times the number of years. So we end up with, if we had $100 for 5 years with 5% interest, and just as a note, remember, 5% interest needs to be turned into a number. So to do that, we divide it by 100. So 5% becomes 0.05. Now, let's put all this together. Our principal becomes $100. 1 is still 1. Our rate is 5% or 0.05 times time, which is the number of years, which is 5. So 0.05 times 5 is 0.25. 1 plus 0.25 is 1.25. Times 100 is 125. So what this means here is that in 5 years, getting 5% interest every year, you get $5 per year. For 5 years, you get $25. So you started with 100, you ended with 125. Not too bad, right? So does this happen in real life? This seems like free money. Yes, it does, but not in the ways you might think. So simple interest is actually used by a couple of different types of investments. And the two that I want to mention is bonds, which is you pay, for example, the US government, aka Uncle Sam, you pay them $100, and then they give you $5 a year for 5 years, and at the end of that 5 years, they give you back your $100. And then also what are called certificates of deposit, or CDs. These are not the CDs that you put into your computer to listen to your newest Gloria Estefan or whoever you'd like to listen to. This is a note very similar to a bond, but is issued by banks. And these CDs work exactly the same. They give you interest every month, or every period rather. And then at the end of the life of that bond or that CD, they give you back the original value of it. Lastly, there are some loans that use simple interest, but very, 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 very few. And also, it doesn't work in your favor. Compound interest loans are much more common, but are also more advantageous. But the bottom line here is basic. Simple interest is rarely used because it gives interest based on only the amount that you started with. Let's now get a little bit more complicated, but get into some real good stuff. Compound interest. Compound interest is a little bit trickier to calculate, but we'll go into an example of, many examples actually, of how to use it. So bear with me. The compound interest formula is this. Now, before your head explodes, again, we'll step through it all a little bit by bit, because it's a lot easier than it looks. We still have our amount, which is how much we end with. We also have our principal, how much we started with. All right, everything's about as we expected. We have our rate, which is still the interest rate. But now, instead of it just being 1 plus the interest rate, we need to have this extra little part that's the times per year, which is how many times per year that interest is given. And then lastly, we have our number of years. Again, I want to make all of this very, very simple to think about as we go step by step. Take your hand, do it with me. Cover up the times per year in both spots. And we have the exact same formula as our simple interest. It is 1 plus the rate, and then to the power of the number of years. So nothing's really gotten crazy here. It's all still the same stuff. But now we have this times per year part. So, what does that mean? Well, banks or other institutions, they're not just going to pay you out once per year. They'll oftentimes pay you out in different periods. So time per year is often called a period. Not the period at the end of the sentence, a period as in a period of time. And this means this is how often your interest is given. So, for every period, I will give the example of it's once per, as well as what number we would put in when we're doing our compound interest. Because remember, we have times per year. We need to put something in that spot. I'll tell you the easy numbers as well as the kind of real meaning behind those numbers. So let's go through the most common. Daily is once per day. So times per year is the number of days in a year, 365. Weekly is once per week. Our times per year is the number of weeks in a year, which is 54. Monthly is once per month. Times per year is the number of months, which is 12. You see a pattern here? Quarterly is once per quarter. Times per year is 4. Semi-annually, once per 6 months. Semi-annual. Times per year is 2. And lastly, annually is once per year, and the time per year is 1. Because I know someone is going to mention it, there is such a thing as continuous interest, which means every single second it's giving you more interest. Olvídalo. We're not going to talk about that today. You almost need a PhD in order to think about continuous interest. Also, it's not very commonly used. We're going to ignore it. Today, we're going to focus on these very common rate periods. Let's go back to Juan. Juan has his money in a bank account that pays 5% interest annually. Annually is once per year. So now, let's do that same calculation we did before, but instead of it just being 5% per year, we're going to do compound interest. The biggest difference here, well, actually, I'll show you. Let's take that big scary formula and we'll break it down bit by bit. The amount is is the answer. Principal is how much he started with, $100. The rate is how much interest he gets annually or per year, 5%. The times per year is 1 because it's once per year. And the number of years is 5. Now it's time to do some math. We're going to fill in all of the numbers that we have from what we just shared. So we have 100 times 1 plus 5% divided by 1 to the power of 1 times 5. So 0.05 divided by 1 is 0.05. 5 times 1 is 5. Pretty simple math so far. Now we get this little thing called an exponent, or to the power of something. That's a very easy way of saying multiply it by itself. The number of times you multiply it is that teeny tiny little number up there. So 1.05 to the power of 5 is like saying 1.05 times 1.05 times 1.05 times 1.05 times 1.05. This number ends up being a little un poco feo, pero we love it. So it ends up being 1.276281565. But we're here with friends. We're going to round it to 1.2763 because we round up to 3. Let's now put that in. Now that we've done that stupid, ugly math, we get to bring it all together. $100 times 1.2763 is how much money Juan will end up with. $127.63. So now, let me keep this up here just for 1 second. So now, Juan ended up with $27.63 in interest. Had Juan used simple interest, he would have ended with $125. Had Juan used compound interest, he would have ended with $127.63. See, it's not crazy math for no reason. It's crazy math because it gives us more money. We like more money. But why? Where's this extra free money coming from? Compound interest pays you based on the principal, how much money you have in the account to start with. But it also pays you interest for anything that you had made prior. To put that into an example, in year 1, both simple interest and compound interest paid $5. 5% of 100 is $5. But in year 2, simple interest still paid Juan $5. In year 2 for compound, because now instead of having $100 in the account, we now have $105. So now we get interest of that interest. So 5% is not of $100, it's of $105. So now we get $5.25. I apologize. That should be $5.03. That is an error on my part. But what is not an error is by the end of year 5, that compound interest will have gone up from $5 to $6.08. Let me put this in a chart to show you it a little bit easier. Oh, it was $5.25. My brain is already ready for the weekend, apparently. Anyway, this is why I like spreadsheets, to double check all of my math when my brain fails me. But let's see what we end up getting here. We end up having, we start here with $100. We get 5% of the starting amount as interest, and now we end with $105. For simple interest, the amount of interest we get does not change. It's $5 every single year until whenever. So, with compound interest, the interest amount is always 5%, but it's 5% of whatever is in the account. So now we have 5% of 105, which is $5.25. Then we have 5% of $110.25, which is $5.51, 5% of 115, which is $5.79, and lastly, $121.55. 5% of that is $6.08, ending us with $127.63. Everyone with me so far? Does anyone have any questions about this? Liliana, if the video is blurry, let me see if I can try and help you with that. So if you go to this lovely webinar, which is right here, in the bottom right, there's a settings option. It's this little cog icon. If you can go to quality, you can set it to 1080p or 720p, and both of those will help make it look a little bit nicer.
You're about to get recursive.
Oh, I know. Hopefully that helps. If not, please let me know, and I can do my best to make these a little bit more easily read. Jonathan needs more light in the room. Let there be light. Alrighty. So let's now look at where this compound interest is used. It is used everywhere. Besides bonds and some very simple examples, compound interest is everywhere. It is how interest rates are used, charged, and calculated. So some of them you benefit from. You like the compound interest because it works in your savings account in your bank. They pay you 5% annually, for example. They don't actually pay you 5%. I wish they did. But they pay you a percentage annually of whatever you have in that account. That interest gets put into that account. So the next time you're getting interest from that interest. And some you don't benefit from, including consumer loans. When you want to buy a house, when you want to buy a car, when you want to go to school, you get loans. These loans charge you interest. Credit card late fees are interest, and debt is interest. So now, let's look at what happens if we change the period of time. We talked about changing simple versus compound interest, but let's try and change the period from annually to something different. Let's go back to Juan, because Juan still wants to make some money. Juan deposits $100 into an account for 5 years. That gives an interest rate of 5%. But instead of this being an annual interest rate, it is a monthly interest rate. How does this change? Well, let's look. Lucia is asking, are DRIPs an example of compound interest? They are, with a little bit of difference. DRIPs, yes, they do what a compound interest formula does. It takes your interest and reinvests it for you. So a DRIP does do that, but a DRIP is based on dividends. Dividends are similar but are not the same as interest rates. Dividends, yes, they are a percent, so you may get a 2% dividend, but it is not a fixed interest rate that doesn't change. The amount that the DRIP pays you is always changing. That's why the dividend aristocrats are so valuable. They are companies that provide recurring, quarterly, by the way, quarterly dividend payments, most of them are quarterly dividend payments that are increasing in amount every year. But yes, they do, well, dividend reinvestment. They reinvest that dividend into more shares. So it does exactly what an compound interest formula would do. You get the interest, you immediate, stick it back in with the principal. All right, so now let's go back to that annual versus monthly example. Here, let's start with our crazy scary formula and go through what we're finding. We start off with $100, we have a 5% interest rate, and this is where we get our change. How many times per year is the interest given? It is monthly, so 12 times per year. And the number of years is 5. Let's do some math. Start off with scary formula. Plug in all the numbers that we have. Principal is 100, rate 0.05, times per year, monthly, remember, 12 times per year. And then the number of years is 5. We now get this, which is, well, 0.05 divided by 12 is a very small number. But it's not just happening 5 times anymore, it's happening 60 times. So in this example, we're using a monthly interest rate. So it's going to be 12 times per year. If we were doing a weekly interest rate, then yes, it would be 52 times per year, or 260 periods. So 0.05 divided by 12 ends up being 0.0042. There's a bunch of more numbers after that, but we're just going to ignore those. To the power of 60. So what this means is it's 1.0042 times 1.0042 times 1.004, 60 times. That ends up giving us a number of 1.2834. So the ending amount is $128.34. Let's now compare. Here on the top, we see our annual compound interest. The first year is 5%, and we end with $105. The second year is 105, 525, so on and so forth. We already went through that example. But the end amount is $127.63. Here is the monthly compound interest kind of. Kind of is because to show this for reals, for really reals, I would need to have year 0.08. I would need to have 12 different periods per year. I'm going to make it all simple. We're just going to look at it per year and the interest rate that you would get paid at the end of that year. What I really want to show you is this. Here, the first year is still the 5% interest rate. Here, we see that the interest rate is already changing because after the first month, you're now getting a little bit more than 5% and a little bit more than 5% after that and a little bit more. Because after the first month, you're probably only getting 40 cents. So now you have $100.40, but now you're taking 5% of that, then 5% of that, and it adds up pretty quickly. Where by the end of year 5, the interest rate is exactly the same. The only thing that's changed is instead of once per year, we calculate it 12 times per year or once a month. That difference ends up coming out to the difference between $127.63 and $128.34. So you made almost 70 cents more by just changing how often your interest is compounded. The interest rate is still 5%. It's still for 5 years, and Juan is still only putting in $100. But by changing the period, how often it's calculated, because it's calculated more often, we will end up with more money in the end. Here is my question to you. We see that annual is $127.63. We see that monthly is $128.34. What do you guys think would happen if we did quarterly? Would we end with more or less than the monthly compound interest? So if we did quarterly compound interest 4 times a year, would we end up with more or less money than the monthly? What do you guys all think? What are we thinking? Less, 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 more, less. Let's see, shall we? I'm going to go here, and we're going to do this. Here, instead of it just being once per year, I'm going to do it out so we see every single quarter. Then what we have is the starting amount, which we start off with $100. Interest paid is 5% of this. And then the ending amount is our starting amount plus our interest paid. And then our starting amount for the next period is how much we ended with. So now, after the first period, I did something goofy here, didn't I? Should be this. I believe that is correct. All right. So now we get to see it broken out every single quarter. So we have quarterly payments. I'll make this a little bit bigger. View. Cool. So here we see we started with $100 and we're still getting our 5% compounded monthly. Or sorry, quarterly, my apologies. At the very end, we end up with $128.20. $128.20. $128.34. So we get less than if we had done it monthly, but we get more. We see we got more than if we did it annually. The more often you do your interest, the more interest you will end up getting. Because remember, the more times it does these little additions, the percent doesn't change, but the amount that you are collecting interest on does. So when we have less periods, the amount will end up being less. The shorter the periods are, the more you will end up getting, because the more those little bits start getting compounded. That is how the interest rate part of all of this works. But there's one big part. Again, I love sharing information, especially formulas and things like this with you all. But the most important thing is showing you why it matters to you and how it applies to your life. And that is where this next part comes in. I have shown you the math. I now want to show you the reason. There's this name of a thing called contributions that is very, very, very important, because it's why interest rates matter. Very rarely are you only putting $100 into a savings account and leaving it. Oftentimes, what you will do is you will put in $100, and then the next month you'll put in $100, and then the next month you put in $100, and then the next month you put in $100. So you make contributions to your account. And by putting in additional money, it increases the dollar amount that you get paid out in interest every year. My mom always told me when I was a kid, for every paycheck you get, put 10% to 20% away right away. Before you even spend anything, take some of that money, put it into either savings or investments. Because she knew the importance of contributions. And I want to show you the importance as well. So because this doesn't just apply to making more money, it also applies to paying off a loan. Compound interest, the amount of interest goes up the larger the amount is, right? So if that money isn't money that I have to spend, but it's money that I owe, lovely Bank of Juan de los Palotes, I want to start paying that off so I don't have to pay as much in interest every month. So you may make additional contributions, or you make contributions to reduce the amount that you have to pay in interest. And these additional deposits or payments are called contributions. Let's now go and do that example that we had before. We're going to go back to Juan, nuestro amigo Juan. And we're going to, instead of him just investing 5% annually, he now decides to start his account with $1,000. And then every year, not even monthly, not even anything, every year, Juan will deposit another $1,000 into that account. How much will Juan have at the end of 30 years? And just because I am a stickler for math, I will say that the way we're going to be doing this math is we will have the interest, we'll add the interest, and after we've done the interest for the year, that is when Juan makes his contribution. Let's go take a look. Here we have the math. Juan, over 30 years, has deposited in $31,000 into this account. We see that in the first year, he made $50 in interest. Yes, Kike. And I actually give that example. So bear with me one moment. I've got you for that. By year 30, so let's just, again, we'll walk through year 1. He starts with $1,000. He gets his 5% interest, and then that gets added on to the amount. After the interest, he puts in his $1,000. See you next year. There is a bunch of lines that are hidden here. That is the rest of the math. But I wanted to just show year 1, 5, 10, 15, 25, and 30. By year 30, he is making $3,300 a month in interest. And he ends that year with $70,760.79, which means from the $31,000 that Juan deposited, he earned $39,760.79 in interest alone. Had Juan not made any contributions, had he only put in his $1,000 and left it there, he would have ended his 30 years with $4,300. Just keep that in mind. He made thousands upon thousands more dollars, making just $1,000 payments every single year to this account. And if we were to look at it in a graph, this is what we end up having. The blue amount is how much money was in the account at that year. The red amount is the amount of interest that he got that year. And we see the more money there is in the account, the bigger and bigger that interest amount is. So that really should show the value of that 5% when that's 5% and then 5% and then 5%. Blaze, this is huge for you because when I was your age, I took a class that we had a project called the Life Project. And it involved all of what I'm talking about right now. It involved compound interest for savings, paying off your car, paying off your home, saving for retirement. All of this is so valuable because when you start early, small contributions become massive, massive return in the future just through that idea of compound interest. Oh no, not the Life Project. Andrew is one of my friends from high school. He had to endure the Life Project alongside me. He knows all about that. But he also understands the value of compound interest as far as learning how to plan for the future goes. So this is what it looks like when you start with a little and you turn it into a lot. Let's now go to the other side. Let's make contributions to a loan amount. Here, what we end up having is that interest rates are not just for savings accounts, but they charge us interest rates when we get a car, home, or education loan. And here, contributions are incredibly important because they reduce the amount of money that the interest is calculated from. Again, I'm not going to bore you with all of this. Let's go and do an example to see this in action. Juan, he made a bunch of money. He now wants to buy a car, and he's going to take out a $30,000 loan to buy his new car. The loan charges him 5% interest per year, and to try and pay off his car, he is going to make $2,000 payments every year for 25 years. So the $2,000 payment is made after the interest of the year is added. So at the end of the 25 years, how much does Juan still owe? Originally, when I made this example, I had it as 1,000. And then I realized that if you tried to make $1,000 payments, you would never pay off the car. You would be actually having to pay, you would end up paying less than the interest you accrue every year. So I had to change it to 2,000. Let's go and look at that chart. Ta-da! We start off here with $30,000 that he owes. 5% interest is $1,500. So the amount after interest that Juan owes is $31,500. He then pays off $2,000, so then it goes down. And he does this for 25 years. So at this point, Juan has put in $50,000 into trying to pay off this car that was $30,000 to buy. But look over here. He still owes money. Even after 25 years and paying $50,000 on a $30,000 loan, Juan still owes $6,136.45. In total, Juan has paid $26,000 in interest alone. And he still needs a little bit more to go. It would take him 28 years to fully pay off this car. I hope that really shows why the contribution amount is important. But I'm going to take it one step further, because that example shows how money going towards a repayment helps to make the interest rates smaller and smaller. Because here we see 1,500, 14, 12, 10, 736, 387. But now what happens if we change the monthly payments from $2,000 to $3,000? Remember, it took Juan de los Palotes 28 years to pay off his car. How many do you guys think it will take him to pay it off with $3,000 payments? Does interest apply to annual index accounts? That is a good question, but that comes down to a topic of APR. That is one that I can't really get into today just because it's a whole webinar unto itself. I promise you the reason I'm doing this today is so I can do APR next Friday. So I promise I'll answer that next Friday. Alrighty, so here's the math here. We start off with $30,000 and the same interest payment of 5%. But now we're making $3,000 contributions. By the end of all of this, Juan paid off his car by year 15. And instead of spending $50,000 to still owe $6,000, instead he paid $42,632, resulting in him paying off his entire car and only paying $12,632.15 in interest. So again, there are some things in life. I apologize. I should not have been saying monthly. It should be yearly payments. Most of the time you make payments towards a loan in months. So I was just talking without thinking about what I was saying. I apologize. I should be saying yearly contributions instead of monthly. Thank you for correcting me on that. I really appreciate that. But again, I want to show you all the important things here. Simple interest is the easiest way to understand how interest works. And there are things in life that use simple interest, most notably bonds and CDs. Other things, such as savings accounts and loans, collect compound interest based on the current amount or the current balance of that account. And understanding why contributions are important to both increasing your savings as well as paying off your loans and debts is incredibly, incredibly important. Where small changes in payments have a massive effect on the overall amount of interest that is paid and how long it takes you to pay it off. And the last thing I want to share with you all is that you never need to do this math on your own. I wanted to show you it because it is important. It is incredibly important to know. Now let me show you how it can be done simpler, all right? I'm done with the math. Let's go look at some easy stuff, shall we? Let me pull up handy dandy Google. And Google has this beautiful mortgage calculator where if you want to buy a house, you can figure out exactly how much it's going to cost you per month. So let's say you have $100,000 for a house. This is 2021 here. All right, let's start with $500,000 for a house. An interest rates right now are incredibly low. If you got a good deal, you're going to get 2.8%. And we're going to do a 30-year mortgage. What this comes out to is we have two things. The total cost of the mortgage, which tells us our interest. This is telling us we will pay $739,610 on a $500,000 loan. So in total, we pay $239,610 in interest. How much would I need to pay monthly to pay that off in 30 years? $2,054. Let's say we change that to 20 years. Watch how this number changes from 740,000 to 650,000. But our monthly payments go up as well, but not as much as you would think. Our monthly payments went from $2,050 to $2,700. But the overall amount that we have to pay has also gone down significantly from $740,000 to $653,000. If we shorten it even more to 10 years, that amount goes down even more to $573,000, where now all you're paying in interest is $73,842. To get to this mortgage calculator, you literally can just Google monthly payment calculator house, car. They're all right here for you. Google makes it easy. And again, I love this because it's easy and simple to see the differences between different loan periods. The last one I want to show you is bankrate.com. This website, in addition to having a lot of great resources for finding different interest rates at different banks, you can have the ability to see how much money you would get from an account. So let's start off with an account of $10,000. No, let's go $1,000. $100 monthly contributions over a period of, let's say, 30 years at an interest rate of 5%. And here what you get is you get a breakout of the initial deposit, that dark blue part, the money you put in the cyan/light blue, and then the seafoam green is the amount of interest that you gained off of that money. I'll be putting the links for both of these. I'll be putting the link for this one in the chat right now, as well as it will be in the resources if you are watching this video when it's already recorded, so that you can experiment with this for yourself and see in real time, using real numbers, what savings and what your return can look like over different periods of time. Magnolia is asking, what is the period here? It uses monthly contributions, but it uses what's called an APY, or annual percentage yield. This is going to come in next week when I talk about APR, which is a way of estimating your interest rate with a bunch of other things thrown in. But for today, I want to again make it very, very simple. Making contributions to a savings account is a great way to increase the value of that investment over time. Making contributions to a loan is an amazing way to reduce not just the amount of money that you have to pay in interest, but the period of time it takes you to finish off that loan. Thank you all so much for bearing with me through a very mathematical webinar, but I hope you all learned something interesting and you have some cool tools to go play around with and show friends or family the value of saving for the future, whether it's putting money aside for a future payment or making contributions towards the payment you've already made. Thank you all so much again for this awesome webinar. Next Friday, I will be continuing this conversation where we will be going into APR, annual percentage rates, as well as APY, annual percentage yield, and talk about those percentages and how they affect us in real life. Members, I hope to see you on Tuesday for our awesome webinar where I'll be talking all about primary market indicators, a way of knowing not just where in the market is best to invest, but knowing if the market is even happy enough to invest in the first place. So that coming for you all on Tuesday, and next Friday, the continuation of this interest rate series where I'll be talking all about APR and APY. But until then, thank you all so much for joining us for today's webinar. As always, if you have any questions or topics that you would like to hear us cover in a future webinar, please send us an email at support@sectorsmadesimple.com. Again, to everyone joining us from my mom's early investor series, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you all here, and we'll see you all very, very soon. Take care, everyone. Have a great and safe weekend. Bye.